The presidential campaign in Uganda is getting really heated. Now, the main challenger, Bobi Wine, and his party are claiming that things have gotten completely out of hand. Since the campaigns kicked off, they say the security forces have just been rounding up people. They have documented over 300 of their supporters and campaign workers being detained. Basically, the opposition is arguing that the current long-time president, Museveni, is trying to kneecap their campaign. And they say that police are not just making arrests, they are also using tactics like tear gas and water cannons to break up their rallies. So it looks like the opposition feels the whole goal is to scare off their voters and make it impossible for them to compete fairly in the January 2026 election. Today on the conversation, I'm joined by Kato Tumusiime, human rights lawyer and political analyst in Kampala, Uganda, and also Godwin Toko, deputy team leader, Agora Center for Research in Kampala, Uganda as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. All right, so let me begin. Yeah, let me begin with you, Kato. Kato, 300 arrests, it's quite a huge number. The opposition says over 300 of their people have been detained since campaigning started. So what does a figure like that tell you about the government's confidence level? Are they operating from a position of strength or fear? What are your thoughts?
The correct number is now, today, as I can remember, it's about 470.
Oh, wow.
Have been arrested and detained in different areas across the country, different regions. But what speaks to that is that at the beginning of the campaign, the people that are in power, the regime that is in power now, maybe never felt that the opposition leader, Honorable Robert Chagulanyi, would gather such numbers, and then they were shocked that people are moving and supporting their candidate. And for them now to create fear and to create a diversion and to create intimidation is now by doing a number of arrests that are brutal in nature, that are lawful, that are illegal, so that they can scare away numbers and supporters from joining their presidential candidate on their nomination rally, on their rally, presidential campaign rally. But to say it's not about the arrests themselves, but it has also now gone to the level of using tear gas in the masses that are gathering at a campaign rally, beating them terribly, using the electric power to just shock them out here and there, knocking them down, shooting them. So it's just that bad that the regime now is looking at how to intimidate and use the support of these opposition people. It's not only happening to the supporters of the Honorable Chagulanyi, but that's also extended to other supporters of the other opposition leaders, including the Honorable Nandala Mafazi. So it is a general problem across the campaign period of this presidential candidate in different areas. But we still see a number of arrests being carried on and justifiably without any just cause, and just throw people in the detention centers. And the number that I've talked about is the number that is known to us, that we have been able to document, but we still receive the number of people that complain that their relatives, their friends are missing. People went to campaign rallies and they have never been seen, and nobody can account for that. But the number that is recorded in custody, both at police centers and the ones that are in remand prisons, are about 475 as I speak of today. A number of them have been released on bail, and others are still there on remand. So that's how the situation is.
Okay. Well, let's also hear from Godwin. Godwin, in addition to that, we actually keep hearing about opposition figures being charged with ridiculous crimes, even treason. And the last time we saw this kind of widespread repression, 54 people were killed in just 2 days of protests. That was in 2021. So what are your thoughts? Because when security forces use tear gas and water cannons so early in the cycle, is the message for the public simply do not show up?
Yeah, thank you for having me again. So first, the correction that the killing happened in 2020, actually.
Okay,
The elections were in January 2021, but the killings happened in November 2018 and 19th. That's the first thing. So it's important to realize that the Ugandan regime that has been in power since 1986, well before I was born, so to say, has always used these tactics during elections. Like it's simply the case of a leopard that can't wish away its spots. So the difference now is that there's social media, there's the internet, it's the digital age, and much of this is well documented to communicate about. So it speaks to a regime that has gone back to its way, its formula of doing things. It views elections as a possible challenge to its power. At the start of this, you mentioned Guinea-Bissau, where there was a coup a few days ago related to the elections. We've had a number of coups like that in Africa now. I think this is like the third, where there's an election, the results, before the results are announced, there's a coup, or in the course of an election. So I think the Ugandan state views elections in the same light, that elections could become problematic. So and yet at the same time, I've always argued that if there's one state in Africa that will always have elections, it's Uganda, because for them, election is the one point where they get the legitimacy, where the Ugandan state desperately derives the legitimacy it needs by saying that, you see, whatever you're saying about us, we were elected. There's a famous interview of President Museveni with Al Jazeera where he said that they called him a dictator, and he said, yeah, but a dictator has been elected 6 times. So he strikes that balance. I don't think he's a fan of elections, because the way these elections are conducted is that it's more like a ceremony to confirm the president, that the incumbent has won. It's like everything is choreographed around that. At the start of the nomination season, Bobi Wine chose a date of nomination, which was the first day of the nominations. But that day was also later chosen by President Museveni. Now, there was going to be a contestation of who had the bigger crowds. And the Electoral Commission said Bobi Wine didn't meet the requirements for the nominations. And so it looked as if they were going to boot his name. Yet, the next day they added him back after Museveni had been nominated. So it's really that kind of ploy, that they organize elections that they can manage. It's really a circus. It's something staged managed. It's like he's the puppet master playing with his strings. So as for the security forces, they're a big cog in that ploy, that they always are going to be one of the forces he will resort to. If we want to downgrade the opposition, and you see, it's not just any member of the opposition getting arrested. It's some of Chagulanyi's biggest helpers. And even well before the election season came about, his main bodyguard was arrested, and he has been in detention for maybe like 6 months now. They've arrested this party's spokesperson. They've arrested a lady called Olivia Lotaya, who seconded Bobi Wine's nomination. So they pick these people who are very pivotal in the mobilization, the organization, and the structure of the party, and then they hope, and many times that's actually what the state gets, that this other people are demobilized, other people are demoralized. Parents in Kampala tell their children that please don't go to opposition rallies, because going to an opposition rally is a close brush with death, or with being jailed for this election, so to speak. Okay. So now,
Uganda has an incredibly young population, 80% under 30. And Kato, Godwin did say that, there will always be elections in Uganda as a brag to, being elected in office. So, but if, you were President Museveni, how do you explain using the military to brutalize the very generation, that's the young ones, that's supposed to inherit the country?
It's a good idea for you to use the military to demobilize and discourage the young population to join the politics of this country, because we are the youngest and now the future belongs to us. I believe that it is a wrong tune that the government and President Museveni are using to use the military actually press back to the young people, because they are pushing them to the wall, and they will have no choice but also turn back and fight back for their rights and what they believe in. I think they are just messing up with the wrong population, the population that is frustrated already, the population that has nothing to lose, the broke population, the youngest population, and you see.
All right, so we'll come back to Kato. Okay. Kato, are you there now? All right, so we're having issues with this connection. Let's come back to you, Godwin. Godwin, you heard the question, but President Museveni is actually going for a 7th term after removing both age and term limits from the Constitution. So is it even fair to call this an election at all?
No, it's not. But the question you put to Kato earlier, directly to first answer, talk a bit about it. Museveni came to power by using arms. He was about 26, 27 when he started going to Mozambique, where there was the rebellion against the Portuguese colonial rule. He learned how to use the arm. He sneaked his young brother there. He had a group of friends from the University of Dar es Salaam where he was studying, including the late John Garang, who became the former freedom fighter of South Sudan. So they got together and formed this group that they viewed themselves as people going to liberate this region. So you must understand that he fought a military war to get himself to power. There was an election he participated in, which was rigged. He said, I don't believe in the results, and he staged a guerrilla warfare that lasted 5 years, and it emerged with him being victorious. So to understand why he always resorts to the military, that is very important, because for him, everything is a military problem. In the 90s and 80s, Uganda had one of the best records, if up to date still, as far as HIV is concerned. But those who studied how Uganda handled HIV, the crisis, said that President Museveni made a very important statement. He said, this is a war. I'm going to deal with it as a soldier. Now, because at that time, I think Uganda sent soldiers to Cuba, and many of them, the Cuban government said that many of them had HIV. So they said that HIV is an existential crisis that is going to wipe out your army. It may not kill out the entire population, but without an army, your population can stand. So a threat, for him, everything that threatens the military becomes something that he's so interested in. And any other problem of any nature for him becomes a military issue that he must handle. So elections to him are a military affair. I must also say that there are so many military men serving in the Ugandan government in civilian positions. The Ugandan constitution says otherwise. It says that for a military person to serve, say, like a minister, they must resign their position. But there's a court petition that has lasted in the court, I think now for 15 years. So it has given him the room to deploy so many. If you look at, if you Google online and find the structure of Uganda's Ministry of Internal Affairs, all the ministers are military men, the permanent secretaries are military people. So for him, that's how you need to understand that his view of election is it's a military affair. It's another threat to my power hold. And what works for me, I don't know if you watch football, there's a famous football coach called Jose Mourinho said, you don't change a winning team. For him, he doesn't change a winning team and the winning formula, which is the army. So he always recourse to the army and use it against his opponents. Whether that opponent is a national threat like HIV, whether it's the Ebola crisis, whether it is a ministry that in his view is corrupt or ineffective, whether it is an election that he must desperately win. So it's always the case. So if the young people are the threat, the army will be unleashed on them. We've also seen army people mobilizing people to vote for the presidency, saying things like, oh, there's a soldier who keeps asking that, do you think I would salute Bobi Wine? Because, well, Bobi Wine has this issue of being a pop star, of being a ghetto person, of allegedly using marijuana. So they paint of him a picture of someone who is incapable, and he says, I can't salute that person, the person I can salute is Museveni. And these things weigh heavy on the masses, and then they get Museveni elected.
Now, President Museveni is, it seems like the NRM has completely blurred the line between the military and the state, because the military gets reserved seats in parliament as well. Is the Ugandan political system, now essentially a civilian costume worn by a military backbone? What is your thoughts on that? I can see that Kato is back. Kato, thank you for rejoining.
Well, thank you. Sorry, I missed up. I think it's
fine. It's fine. Let's hear from you if you can answer this question.
And this is among the problems that we face, not only in Uganda, but it's now an African problem. But during the election season, the election year process, internet is the biggest problem, being the biggest tool used by the young people to mobilize, to criticize and speak all about things that they want to speak and communicate to the rest of the public. So we normally get internet interferences, and we expect a shutdown very soon during and before and after the elections. But to say that it is now hard for one to differentiate between the NRM party and the state in Uganda. The government that is leading the country, it is very hard, because most of the people that are in the NRM this side are now the best leaders this side, including the army now at 1 point speaks for the NRM, which is a party that is the ruling party in government. So it is very hard for you to say that. But to say that constitutionally, for you to be able to differentiate the roles of the UPDF and the army, they shouldn't involve directly into the politics of the individual. The one inch is experience. Because there must be a differentiation on who accounts to what and where do you belong. If the constitution says that we shall have the UPDF, the army, that is non-partisan, and then they join the parliament, for example, and then when it's coming to voting for any issue that is of or that is of an effect to the country, then they join the ruling party. Then it means that you have an army that is already partisan, which is unconstitutional from the face of it, and therefore that must be stopped. But I should say that this is intentional. It is not by accident that we have these people in these different positions as ministers, as MPs representing the UPDF, as if the UPDF don't belong to a part of the country. That's a discussion for another day. But to say that, like Godwin said, for President Museveni and his cabal and his team that they have been together, they feel that they own this country, and they feel that without them we cannot move as Uganda. So they have to do whatever it takes to eliminate every other young person that moves up his head to speak about the future of Uganda, and therefore to deal with them. And that's the opportunity they use, that if you are gathered somewhere on a political rally, that's the best way of how they can bundle you up, have you arrested, have you tortured, have you killed, and all the rest. So it is a general problem beyond even starting this kind of election every other time.
Oh, okay, now you did just complain about the internet shutdowns. To you, Godwin, the ruling party knows that the youth supports the NUP, but they also know that the youth are highly active on social media as well, just like yourselves. Why do they continue to use tools like the internet shutdowns and arrests, for insulting the president on TikTok?
So I cannot emphasize enough the nature of government that Uganda has. Yeah, even for Africans, it's a unique government. You talked about the state and the ruling party being intertwined. Yes, because the state was formed by an army called the National Resistance Army, NRM. Now, when they needed to become accepted by the World Bank, accepted by them, accepted among the League of Nations, they turned that army into a political movement called the NRM. They changed the army for movement. So these are things that you must understand. So about the internet, yes, Uganda does have a very, very robust internet space. There's a lot of discussions that happen on the internet. And if you want to understand that, just look at President Museveni's tweets. He tweets an average of about 2 tweets a day. Every year. I think even by African standards, that's really high. You probably never outcompete Trump, but very few presidents tweet as much as that in Africa. He has dismissed an IGP, Inspector General of Police, the highest ranking police officer, through a tweet before. He has made appointments of ministers through Twitter and all this and things like that. Now, it's not only he that is fascinated by social media. The Ugandan young people also use a lot of social media. I must begin by pointing out that in the lead up to the 2021 elections, which was the last election we had about 5 years ago, there was a research by Facebook that showed that the Ugandan state had hired bots whose intention was to interfere with the election results by manipulating public opinion. So Facebook blocked those accounts. The Ugandan government reacted by blocking Facebook. So as I speak to you now, this almost 5 years later, to this day, to access Facebook in Uganda, I need VPN. If visitors to Uganda get shocked that their Facebook is not working until they get to VPN. That's the contempt the Ugandan state has. It's true what Kato said. We know that the internet is going to be banned as this election approaches. We know that the president really knows that people can mobilize through the internet, and the issue of the internet started around the time of the Arab Spring, 2011. That's when they realized that people can actually mobilize. They can go from the virtual to the physical world and cause a threat to the government or threat to the regime. So you're going to it's really the same old script. It's going to play again. Already I see them making a case for why the internet should be banned. They keep saying things like people are mobilizing here. You talked about the people who are arrested. Yes, I worked on that at Agora. We had a list of about 24 people who were arrested, most of them between 18 and about 24. So one of them made a video on TikTok where he said he had a mock trial in a place he called Dog Nation. And he was sentencing the president of Dog Nation to jail for being a corrupt and irresponsible president. Now, they viewed that as an insult to President Museveni and arrested him. And yes, there is a robust legal framework in Uganda, ridiculous, but in existence, that can be used to gag social media so much. So I could say anything over the internet. and they'll interpret it in a way that that breaches one of the laws.
Yeah,
and pick me up.
Absolutely. But then looking at the reported human rights abuses and the closure of the UN Human Rights Office in Kampala last year, how effective at the moment is the diplomatic community today? Are they, just issuing toothless statements, and do those statements even register with the government anymore? To you, Kato. Kato.
Diplomatic that we had in Uganda had a voice. They would speak about an issue and it would be heard, and we could have at least a change. But now, where the first son here in Uganda, who is the CDF, summons and threatens to arrest and do whatever sorts of criminality on the member of a certain embassy here in Uganda, you call it the American embassy, the biggest embassy that you can say. The EU itself is already sleeping in bed because they fear of what could happen, especially when these people, especially the first son, General Mozi, who is at the same time the CDF, also threatens and openly. And to see that he cannot be ashamed to even come and say sorry, but it's through the uncle, who is also a general, that has to come and apologize for the actions of the son for mistreating the diplomats in this land that are respected. And over time, we have seen that even these diplomatic people have just kept quiet. They have decided to leave the issues of Ugandans, even when we run to them as human rights defenders, we have no help. So they have also decided to keep and protect themselves with their dignity, and they don't want to be mistreated, to be pulled out from their offices and also tortured in the broad daylight. So they have actually slept on the job. Even the small statements that they would issue about human rights abuses and violations are no longer coming out. That speaks to how dull they have become over time. And it's not about to change, because the times they are heading to are times of where everybody now speaks ill about them openly on how they want to mistreat them if they want to involve themselves in the politics of Uganda, speaking to the background of the militarism, the rebel people that took up arms and fought the government are now in leadership. So it's not about to change. And I believe even the statements that have come out, a few of them, they have reduced in number, but a few of them that have come out have nothing useful to add to demand for the rights to be protected, promoted, and upheld in this country.
Oh, okay. Now, sadly, we actually have to wrap up now, but, we all know that the opposition remains divided. On one hand, you have Bobi Wine's NUP and veteran leader Kizza Besigye often competing. So in a system that's divided or designed to divide and conquer, how can they possibly beat the NRM machine without a single united front and a coordinated strategy? That is one question that needs to be answered. But thank you so much, Kato Tumusiime and Godwin Toko, for your time and for speaking on this.